Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Motorcycle Adjacent Podcast. I am your host, Walt from WaltInPA. It is the day after Christmas, so we're going to try to keep this episode kind of short and sweet. So before we get started, first things first, Merry Christmas if you celebrate it, Happy Holidays if you don't, and hope you and yours have a very happy and fruitful New Year. So if this is your first time checking out the Motorcycle Adjacent Podcast, I'd like to thank you very much for doing so. The Motorcycle Adjacent Podcast, based on the name, is a general motorcycle podcast with the creative leeway to wander if we need to cover different topics. So in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about Christmas. I've got some wonderful Christmas gifts from my wife this year. We are going to discuss a little bit of riding that I did last Saturday, and then finally we're going to discuss an adventure that I went on with Steve, aka Untamed Ride, which was really fun and felt like a real live adventure. Complete with things falling off of bikes and having to double back to find them. It was pretty fun. I hate to say it, like it was an adventure, but I had so much fun, even though things didn't go exactly the way they should. All right, so for that very first topic, we're going to talk a little bit about Christmas. So in the past, my wife has gotten me kind of odds and ends for the motorcycle as Christmas gifts. They're usually pretty thoughtful. They're not always the most useful, but she does put a lot of care and thought into what it is that she gets me. This year, I got a variety of heated gear, which I really needed. I think she got tired of seeing me come home from these cold rides, shivering, struggling to get warm again, and decided to pick me up some heated gear. I've got a brand new pair of heated socks because the pair that I have doesn't work all that great. I'll be doing a review on those at some point, as well as the new ones. She got me a heated vest, which she actually got me the hot-wired 12-volt version of the Tourmaster heated vest. Unfortunately, I don't have a hot wire setup on this on any of my bikes, and I've been relying on batteries. So I did have to order the 12-volt lithium-ion battery pack for Tourmasters in order to make the vest battery-operated like I had wanted. And she also picked me up a new pair of, I was going to say heated socks, but I think I already said that. I think the cold is getting to me a little bit. Oh, she picked me up a doormat, more or less, that said Kawasaki on it, which was really cool. I wanted to get one for my Kawasaki Ninja. Underneath my Yamaha, there's a race mat. She got it for me for my birthday. It says Yamaha on it. It's like 6 feet long by 3 feet wide. You park the bike on it. It's very extravagant for what it is. I mean, it is stored in a shed. It's not like I take this thing to the racetrack and I need to put it on a mat or anything. But I thought it was really cool to have kind of a place for the bike to sit, kind of a warm and cozy home in the shed. So I've been meaning to get one for my Kawasaki Ninja to match. And I was looking at ordering one, I don't know, a couple months back. Unfortunately, the race mats, the one that she ordered for the Yamaha, is back ordered. It's unavailable. So she wound up getting me like a welcome mat. It's like, I don't know, 2 foot by 3 foot. I'm going to put it at the foot of the shed or at the door of the shed. And I think it'll be a cool little addition to the motorcycle shed. I really like little odd things like that. I mean, doormats aren't kind of the thing that most guys look for, but I thought it was pretty cool, and it kind of goes with the very rustic decor in here, or minimalist decor that we've got going on in here. And the heated gear, it's something that I definitely need if I want to continue riding into the winter. Winter has really set in here in Pennsylvania. We've had a couple of snow days, actually. School's been canceled twice now. The first time due to anticipated heavy snow. The second time due to freezing rain and stuff. So temperatures have been getting kind of low. And, heated gear is really, really nice. So huge thank you to my wife. Thanks to her wonderful gifts, I'll be able to ride a little more comfortable into the winter season here in southeast Pennsylvania. And I'm really looking forward to it. So I suppose it was around the middle of last week at some point, Some of the guys in Discord were chatting away, and Steve dropped a message in the group ride channel asking if anyone was up for going for a ride on Saturday. Now, it's kind of a running joke that the only people that say yes to a group ride when it's under 40 degrees is usually me, and it's usually Steve. So he posted this message in the group ride channel. I happily told him, yeah, I'll go for a ride with you on Saturday. It was supposed to be somewhere between like 38 and 40 degrees. And, I thought it would be kind of a cool little adventure. It's been a while since I got a chance to go out and ride with Steve, and I was really looking forward to it. So Saturday rolls around, I send Steve a text message, and I say, hey, are you still up for going for a ride today? Like, what time do you want to do this? And he got back to me letting me know that he had a change of plans. He had something going on, and he needed to take a ride out to Jersey to take a look at something. And he was looking to push the ride to Sunday. So I said, sure, I'll join you Sunday. It's supposed to be colder. It's going to be like high 30s with wind. But yeah, what the hell? I'll go for a ride on Sunday. Sounds like fun. So Saturday rolls around. Steve isn't available. I hop on the bike and I decide to go out for an adventure. I went out to, I believe it's the Cabin Run Covered Bridge. I've been trying to do a little more of these covered bridge runs because I think it's fun, and there are these really cool little historical sites that I like visiting. So I went out to see the Cabin Run Bridge in Lancaster County, and I was a little surprised. I mean, usually I do a little bit of research on these bridges before I go, but I've been dealing with this issue of analysis paralysis where I decide that I want to go out for a ride, but I struggle to pick a destination, and I find that if I try to research something too much, I tend to go down the rabbit hole, and I spend more time like looking at a particular thing and why maybe I should go somewhere else instead, kind of looking at different things on the map. So I saw that there was a covered bridge in Lancaster. I saw that it wasn't terribly far away, so I just plugged it into the GPS, hopped on the bike, and went. Now, the covered bridge, it looks like it's set up similarly to the South Perkasie Covered Bridge, where at one point in time it crossed over a waterway and was the mode of travel. But it's since been replaced by a new concrete structure. And it looks like they just picked up the bridge and then moved it like a couple hundred feet and plopped it down into a field. Now the field it's a campground. It looks like there's, I think it's Cabin Run Campground or something. I don't know. But the covered bridge is situated inside of private property. It looks like the bridge is now privately owned. It's gated. It's closed off. I mean, like, you can walk up to the mouth of the gate and look inside, but there's an old metal gate closing off both ends of the bridge. There's like an old tractor stored in there and some other miscellaneous odds and ends. So it's not like you could really get inside and take a look at the historical structure and get out and around it, because the whole time I'm moving around, I'm thinking like I'm just waiting for someone to come out and tell me like, hey, get lost. There's a reason why the campground is roped off and your motorcycle is parked like in front of a blockade. But I still wanted to look around. I took some pictures, took a little bit of video. I thought it was a pretty cool bridge. Unfortunately, it's not in the best of shape. It looks like it's become a giant shed, open at both ends for them to store stuff in. I'd love to see things like that preserved, but it is what it is. One more covered bridge checked off of my Pennsylvania covered bridge bucket list, and I enjoyed myself, even though it was pretty damn cold. So I wound up leaving the covered bridge, and I decided to stop in at the Morgantown Coffee House. They're kind of like a high-end eatery / cafe. I've eaten there a couple of times. The food is fantastic. Their prices are a bit high, but awesome place. Love the coffee, love the food. And it was cold, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to ride. I think it was about a half an hour away. I'd go over there, I'd get a cup of coffee, wrap my cold hands around a nice warm cup of coffee, get some coffee beans to take home, maybe hang out for a little while. But when I got there, they were kind of busy. I didn't really want to be the one guy sitting at the table by myself. So I just picked up some coffee beans, whole beans, threw them in my backpack, and then just hopped on the bike and left. I stopped over at the Twin Valley High School because it's up on a hill, and you can get some really cool pictures up there with the Lancaster landscape in the background. It's just a really cool place for bike photos with, again, landscape in the background. From there, I went over to the Geigertown Railroad, which is, it's not an actual, it's called the Geigertown Railroad, but it's not really a railroad. It is a memorial site for a railroad enthusiast who died a number of years ago. And this is his collection that's been kind of kept up by his grandfather, I believe. It's just a collection of miscellaneous stuff. Like there's old railroad equipment, there's sections of train track, there's old signage, old cars. Some of them are in half decent shape and they look good. Other one looks like they were in a fire and they were going to be restored at some point, but never quite got there because the guy died. It's a place I've been to a handful of times, but it was kind of on the way home, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to stop, get off the bike, walk around a little bit, take a couple of pictures, find a place to pee, and yeah, that was another one of my little stops on Saturday. And then just kind of doing a little mental checklist right now. I don't think I stopped anywhere else. I think I may have been getting really cold at that point and, eventually made my way home. It was, 38 to 40 degrees or something like that. It wasn't like bitter, really, really cold, but it was cold enough. It was a fun ride. My heated socks worked pretty well for most of the ride. I had on a pair of, I think they're Sedici winter gloves or Thin Slate by 3M. They're kind of bulky, but they work fairly well. The only issue that I have with them is my fingertips get really, really cold. The rest of my hand is okay. It's just the fingertips. I guess, I don't know, just the way the gloves are situated, the air just kind of bites into your fingertips. And, again, it was a great ride on a cold day. So the next morning, I met up with Steve, and we were going to go on a ride. There was no destination picked out. And before I got together with Steve, a couple weeks ago, he had mentioned that he was going to pick up a pair of heated gloves for his wife. And I said, hey, do me a favor, get me a pair as well. So he said, sure, I'll take care of it. But I hadn't gotten over to his house to pick up the gloves. And a couple of weeks had went by. So I texted him in the morning, a few hours before we were supposed to meet up. And I said, do me a favor and throw those heated gloves on the charger, because when we go out, we're probably going to need it. Or I'm probably going to need those gloves. It's supposed to be, mid to high 30s. It's going to be a cold one. So he charged up the gloves. I got some fresh batteries in my socks. I got all bundled up. We meet up. I put the gloves on. I get my gear all situated, and we set off. And I don't turn on any of my heated gear at this point. I have the gloves off. I have the socks off. My thought was, I want to ride as far as I can while I'm comfortable or until I get uncomfortable. And that is when I'll turn the heated gear on, because I want to make it last as long as possible. So we start riding. We get maybe 3 miles down the road, and Steve says, I need to pull over and fiddle around with my GPS. It's not starting where I need it to start, and I need to fix it. So we pull into a parking lot. I hop off my bike and immediately turn on all my heated gear, because in that 3 mile stretch, it was damn cold. So we hop back on the bike and we start heading north, I believe. So we ultimately decided on this scenic loop that Steve did a couple months ago in the late spring, early fall. It goes up from the Boyertown area up into, I believe, Easton, up around, and then way out into Berks County, and before it heads back to home. Now, it's supposed to be about a 3-hour trip, which worked out really well because I had plans, and 3 hours would get me home, roughly where I needed to be. So we get out there and we start riding, and I don't know what happened with the time estimate, but it wound up taking us way, way longer than the anticipated 3 hours. So we get about an hour and a half, an hour 45 minutes into the trip, and we're coming down this fairly scenic road. I mean, I think there's some woods on the one side, and there's what looks to be, I don't know, just some open grassy areas to the left. And we're coming down this road, and Steve says, there's not much out to the left except for the river. I thought, okay, well, where's the river? And I'm looking The river must be out there a ways. Steve hits a bump. He says, "Oh, watch out for that big bump." So I turn, I look at Steve, and I see something scoot across the road. Now, my initial thought was, oh, Steve went past a piece of styrofoam, and the wind from his bike just pushed it across the road. It looked like if you get a TV or you get some sort of appliance, there's that black styrofoam material that they use to keep the appliance or the TV in place in the box so that it doesn't like bang around. So it looked like a chunk of this, like a baseball hat sized chunk of styrofoam just lackadaisically blew across the street. I don't think much of it. I swerve around, I avoid the bump, and I continue going back to looking to the left, taking in the scenery. And we get to this point where it looks like tailings piles or something. If you've ever seen Gold Rush, when they after they get done mining, all the loose gravelly material is just in like mounds. And that's what this looked like. There was a bunch of like mounds of gravel off to the side. I'm just kind of looking over there. I'm seeing it. Eventually, hey, there's the river that Steve was talking about. So we talk a little bit over comms. I never mentioned the styrofoam thing because I assumed that he saw it when he went past it. And eventually we decide to stop at this Mexican place for lunch. So we get into the parking spaces, turn off the bikes. He gets off his bike and he looks down at his bike and he's like, oh no, that's not good. And I realized what he's talking about. His rear seat cowl is missing. Kind of like my Ninja 400 back there. It's got the main seat and then there's the pillion seat behind it, which is a separate entity. Well, the one for his Aprilia RS 660 was practically useless for passengers. So he wound up putting this cowl on there. And this cowl goes on in place of the seat and kind of locks everything in place. You have to take the cowl off to remove the rear seat. So anyway, he hit the bump. It must have jarred it enough that the cowl flew off. I saw it as a piece of styrofoam. So he's kind of worried about it, and I immediately think to myself, that wasn't a piece of styrofoam that I saw blow across the road. It had to be your seat. So I tell him what I saw, where I saw it. We go in, we get lunch, we warm up, and then we double back to go find what I thought was that piece of styrofoam. Fortunately, it was only like 15 minutes away, and we found it intact on the side of the road. It was kind of scuffed up, but no one had run it over. It was in a really bad spot. It was on a hill, so couldn't really park the bikes. Couldn't really park the bikes to get off the bike, and it was a weird position, so Steve can't reach it from on the bike while balancing it. So we had to go up a little bit further and pull off into some guy's driveway. And then he had to run and grab the seat. Snapped it right back on. It doesn't look great. It looks like it got shot across the road, but the cowl was intact and it was pretty expensive. So I think he's going to try to do some kind of wrap or do some paint to touch it up, do something to kind of dress it up so he doesn't have to order a new one. But yeah. If you're ever on a group ride and you see something that could possibly be a piece of someone's motorcycle, it's probably a good idea to speak up because it might actually be a part of someone's motorcycle. I learned the hard way. So at this point, we doubled back and added 15-20 minutes onto the trip. And then we had to spend another 15, maybe 20 minutes getting back to where we were before. So at this point, I think we were over 2 hours into the ride, possibly 2.5 hours before we stopped for lunch, which wound up adding another hour onto the trip. So this 3-hour loop wound up being way more than 3 hours, and we weren't even at the halfway point yet. So we're looking at the clock, we're looking at the time, the travel time, and we decide, well, we don't want to bail on this trip. We want to press on. It's going to be cold. It might be dark, but we want to finish out this ride. So we go on down the road, and Steve says he wants to stop and get gas because there isn't much from there on out. It gets pretty scenic, pretty rural. And he pulls over, he gets gas, I top off, he goes in to use the bathroom, and I'm doing the old, how many hands of light is there in the sky? Because I'm starting to worry about the time frame. Neither one of us wants to bail on the ride, but I really didn't want to be riding after dark. So Steve comes out and he starts looking at his phone, and I said, just out of curiosity, what time does the GPS say we're going to finish the map, the estimated time of arrival? And he says, well, there's like 2.5 hours, like 2.5 hours left on the trip based on our location right now. And I did some quick math, and I said, that's after 6 o'clock. By the time we get home, it's going to be, not only is it going to be dark, this is going to be full on dark. I don't want to ride in the dark. I'm not afraid to ride in the dark, but it's not something I enjoy doing. This time of year, you got to worry about deer moving around. It's going to be pitch black, 6 o'clock. This is going to be a rough ride. And the more concerning part of all this is not that it was going to be dark, but it was already in the mid-30s. When the sun goes down, we might be riding in the 20s. Don't know if the heated gear is going to last. Like, this is starting to feel like a real live adventure. Something like out of the Itchy Boots channel, or something you'd see Ewan McGregor and Charlie Borman doing in Long Way Down. Where this is like a real life action adventure. And, neither one of us wanted to bail on the trip, but ultimately we decided it was best to reset the GPS and make a beeline for home. And it's probably a good thing that we did. So making a beeline for home pretty much made us go back the same way we came. There wasn't a whole lot of deviation from the original route. We still stayed off of highways and stuff like that. I mean, we still used the twisty road option on Kalimoto, which makes the ride fun, in my opinion. And on the way back, the sun's starting to set. We're far enough north that there was full-on snow at one point. There's still snow in the grass. There's snow piled up where the plows had gone by. The roads are clear, but you can see that there had been snow in the area, and it's been cold enough that none of it is melted. So we're making our way back. We're getting a little bit closer to home, and then the heated gear starts to go out. My socks stop getting warm. Like, my feet are starting to get cold. Steve is really cold. He's saying that his hands hurt. He wants to pull over and turn his heated gloves up. There are 3 options: low, medium, and high. We both had our gloves on low, trying to get the maximum amount out of it. But at this point, we were close enough to home that Steve wanted to crank the gloves up and just see how far he could get his hands, back to some sort of warm temperature. I opted not to. I wanted to keep. I was really cold, but I didn't feel like I needed to jack the gloves up. I was more worried about turning up the heat too much and having the gloves completely shut off on me before I got home. So I was just kind of milking them all the way down. So Steve turns his gloves up. We get going. We decide to turn off on a highway or on one of these major routes on the way home. So we're cruising on down at like 60 miles an hour on this 2-lane highway. And all of a sudden, my left hand gets really cold. I look down. The glove is completely dead on my left hand, but I still have juice in my right hand. So my right hand is warm. My left hand is freezing cold. My toes are aching because they're so cold. I'm letting Steve know what's going on, and he keeps asking me, do you want to pull over and use your other gloves? Because when I rode over to his house, I had my other Sedici winter gloves on. And I said, well, I really don't want to wear 2 different gloves going down the road. I don't know that the Sedici gloves are all that much warmer than my new heated gloves. And I still have juice in one hand, so I'm just going to kind of bear it. I kept taking my glove and sticking my hand between my body and the tank, just trying to keep it out of the wind. And trying to keep it kind of sort of warm that way. But yeah, it was a bone-chilling ride home. It's a really good thing we didn't continue going on the other route, because it would have been bad. We would have been riding probably another hour. The heated gear would have been long dead. And yeah, it would have been just really, really cold. And it would have been dark. And probably no fun at all. So we got home a little after sunset. It was just starting to get dark. Parked the bike in the shed. Went in the house. Took a little while for me to get warmed up. Had my wife make me hot cocoa. Put a pair of fresh batteries in my heated socks, because they take AA batteries. And tried really hard for a good 45 minutes to get warm. And It took a while before I finally came around and I feel like it felt comfortable again. But it was, even though it was an adventure and it was really cold, and there were times it wasn't really fun, like when my fingers and toes were hurting. But looking back, I mean, it was a great adventure. Something I'll look back on as one of my little Pennsylvania winter adventures on the motorcycle. It was fun. No one got hurt. It was a little uncomfortable, but that's what great stories are made of, I think. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this episode of the Motorcycle Adjacent Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a huge favor. Like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget, I'm available on YouTube, all the usual social media platforms under WaltInPA. And you can also find the Motorcycle Adjacent Podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Anchor, all those good podcast repositories, or it's definitely not suppositories. I think it's a repository. Either way, look me up. As always, thank you very much for watching. Ride safe, and I will catch you in the next one. No, I can see my breath. I don't know if you can see my breath. Ooh. It's winter. For those of you that decide to stick around past the credits at the end, I think I've made a decision on a way to keep the shed warm. I'm going to pick up a propane space heater, and I think that's going to get me through the winter. So if you've been curious of how this thing is going to all work out, that's the route I think I'm going to go. It means I'm going to have to cut a hole in the shed to run the pipe, the gas line in, because I'm going to get a 20-pound propane bottle, same kind you use for a gas grill, to power the space heater. And the propane tank has to be outside, or it should be outside. Not really a good idea to keep pressurized propane tank inside of a building. So I don't have that sort of death wish. So I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to store it outside and then pipe it on in to the space heater. And it should take the edge off and make it more comfortable to do these episodes. So that's where we're at.